Ted Dabrowski from Wirepoints. Right now, I'm standing on the border of Illinois and Indiana. About outmigration. Illinois is losing more people than virtually any state in the country. And in the last 2 years alone, we've lost over 15,000 people on net to Indiana. They're taking the smartest, they're taking our tax base, and it's really destroying our state. So right now, we're going to watch a short film, and then we're going to talk to an expert about the outmigration problem. Let's roll that film. Illinois is shrinking. It was one of only 3 states in the nation to lose population over the last decade. It wasn't that long ago that Illinois was one of the nation's great destination states. Today, all that has changed. Decades of bad policies have made it too expensive to live here. There aren't enough good jobs. And Illinois no longer trusts their government. Over the last 10 years, Illinois' population has declined by 18,000 people, the second most in the country. Illinois is one of the nation's extreme outliers. And it's not due to cold weather. All of Illinois' neighboring states, even the cold weather ones, grew their populations as Illinois shrank. The decline has been felt across the entire state. State-to-state migration data from the IRS shows Illinois has been losing people of every age group and every income bracket for years. College students, families, young professionals, retirees, the rich and the poor. Far more are moving out than moving in. And as they move, they take their incomes with them, damaging Illinois' tax base. Since 2000, Illinois has lost a cumulative $470 billion in income to outmigration. That's billions in tax revenues that could have helped the state, now gone forever. Illinois is trapped in a downward spiral where growing government debts are falling on a continuously shrinking population. Unfortunately, Illinois politicians only seem interested in hiking taxes. Increasing taxes in Illinois, which Kiplinger already calls the least tax-friendly state in the nation, will just make more people leave. Illinoisans need reforms, not tax hikes. To learn more, visit wirepoints.org. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Ted Dabrowski from Wirepoints, and I'm so lucky to be joined by Jeannie Ives. She is a former legislator for 6 years. She a gubernatorial candidate and somebody that I worked with very closely on legislation and what was happening in Springfield during her years there. What's interesting about Jeannie is that she was the one that would read all the information about a bill. She would go into the Excel files. She knew the details of laws that were out there and what was happening. And so that's why I've invited her to speak with us about outmigration. Look, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. You be left, right, conservative, liberal, whatever. What we know is that Illinois is losing people at record levels. No state except for New York competes with us. No state is losing people like we do. And that's probably the biggest sign of dissatisfaction, that people are having to go to other states to find their opportunities. And so, right, we got to figure this out. We got to understand why people are leaving, what are the facts, and then what do we do about it. So Jeannie's going to join me for that here, and we thank her for joining. So let me just lay out a few facts before I ask Jeannie a few questions. First of all, Illinois, we had new census numbers come out recently. Illinois shrank by 114,000 people, a huge shrinker. None of our neighbors were shrinking like that. That's 1% of our population. Only New York lost more people on a percentage basis. Now, if you go back to the last decade, 2010 to 2020, we were one of just 3 states in the entire country to shrink. And our company was West Virginia and Mississippi. So Illinois, West Virginia, Mississippi, the only 3 states to shrink. Now, during that same period, Florida and Texas were booming. Florida grew over that same period 4 million people. I mean, think about the dynamism of getting 4 million people. Florida, 2.8 million people. 87 of Illinois' 102 counties lost people. That's trouble for virtually every county. And look, an important point in that decade, none of our neighbors shrunk during that decade. They all gained more than 100,000 people. Indiana gained 300,000 people over that decade. Wisconsin gained 200,000 people. So forget this cold weather stuff. Not true, right? People are leaving Illinois. So Jeannie, I've opened it up. People are leaving Illinois. There's some ugly facts. I got a few more. Give us some of your thoughts about that.
Well, and it's accelerated. It's not like it's something that just happened, years ago. It happened last year. It's happened for the last 8 years. And every one of those 114,000 people who left Illinois last year, those represent real individuals making decisions for their family and making a decision that their future is not in Illinois, that they need to leave for whatever purpose. And there's multiple purposes, but let's step back a little bit and see where it actually also starts. And that's with our high school, public school graduates. We know that nearly 50% of the students who graduate from Illinois' public high schools leave to attend college in another state. And a lot of times they do not come back. And so we've got real issues here starting young. But then you've got families, and I know that you guys have done the work here, Ted, and we really appreciate the work that you've been doing at Wirepoints. But you know that it's that working age group that is making a decision to leave the state of Illinois, and with them they're taking billions of dollars over time of their own money in revenue to other states. And what does that mean? You lose those income taxes, you lose those sales taxes, and eventually you have a state in decline, which is really where Illinois is.
Yeah, so let me give you a few more facts because this isn't just Jeannie and I making stuff up. The IRS, Internal Revenue Service, well, we know something about them.
Yeah.
They know where everybody lives because you file your taxes from a certain state. They know how many people live in your family, and they know how much money you make. And so what they do every year is they compile all the data. They look and see who was in one state one year, in a different state the next. And so you can add up, and they provide all that data to people like us. We go in there and we look and see who's winning the battle for people and their wealth. And this is just state to state migration, right? This has nothing to do with international immigration and not talking about births and deaths, just talking about who's moving from where to where. So in that last decade that we talked about, we lost 700,000 net, right? So we had people moving in and moving out. And on net, we lost 700,000 people to other states. Only California and New York lost more people. In contrast, Florida and Texas gained over 1 million people. So you see who's winning. Florida was the biggest winner by far. They gained 125,000 net migrants and $17.5 billion in new income that could be taxed. In that same data, in the same IRS data, we lose in every single income group and in every single age group. So we're losing everybody. And Jeannie said we're losing the most important people, our young. Some people might argue that our most important people might be our wealthiest because they paid the most taxes. So we're losing them too, and that's the hard part. And let me just give you one.
Ted, you speak about Florida. I'm going to admit to your audience, I actually am here in Florida right now at my friend's place. And it's like a little bit of, the western suburbs has relocated to Naples, Florida. There's so many people here that have just simply left Illinois and they are here in Florida. And I got to tell you, it's a lot more free here in Florida, and there's no income tax, and people are making that calculation. There are people who serve in state legislature, and I will not tell you whose the name is, but his daughter moved from Champaign, Illinois to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And they just simply did a simple comparison, took your standard $400,000 home in Champaign, $400,000 home in Chattanooga, looked at your water, how much you pay for water, looked at how much you pay for gasoline over a year, looked at how much you pay in income taxes, and the differential was nearly $15,000 just on about 4 items. And, so people are making that calculation every single day and deciding where they want to do, because it's not just $15,000 in year one. It's $15,000 in year one. Maybe it's $16,000 in year two, because your property taxes in the state of Illinois never seem to go down. And over time, that adds up to real money that they can do something with, like afford their to go to college.
Yeah, and it's, there's different kinds of calculations. I tell the story of a wealthy friend that I had who had a pretty nice home in the North Shore. And he did the math, just like you said, Jeannie. He did the math. He was paying almost $30,000 in taxes in the North Shore. He looked at a place in Colorado. It was $3,000 in property taxes. $27,000 savings per year, invested at 6% for 20 years, and it was like $1 million. And he said, that's $1 million I can use for my kids' college, for my retirement. You know, easy calculation. Now, he's a sophisticated guy, right? Other people are just doing the kitchen math. They're sitting at the table and saying, look at the property taxes in Indiana, or look at my friend just moved there. Like you said, the numbers just become obvious, whether it's gas prices, property taxes, sales taxes, they add up.
Yeah. Well, we know that this is happening right now. If you live in on the border of Illinois, and literally, I think it's something like 75% of Illinoisans live within an hour of the border, because we're kind of a long, narrow state. And they're just going across the border to shop. They're going across the border for lower gas prices. And so that's already happening, and it's been happening for a long time. People will go where they can get the best price. Let's just face it. And that hurts us, and there's no reason for it. Illinois should be a thriving state. I know that when I moved here 30 years ago, I'm one of 6 kids, and 4 of the 6 of us moved to Illinois in the early 90s, all for job opportunities in different industries. And it was a great, thriving place to be. We loved it. And I love the fact that my siblings also were in Illinois with me. Family matters, and increasingly, families are getting separated because they find opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, so Jeannie, you know, what do you say? Look, a lot of people say, you know, on Wirepoints, people who are fed up and have left, they just say, just leave Illinois, right? Just leave. Taxes are going up. But there's a lot of people who don't leave, and a lot of people who don't want to leave. So what's your thought about that and your experience there?
Well, the truth is a lot of people don't want to leave. And when you do talk to people, what does keep them here is their job, their business, if they own their own business, or family. They just do not want to leave family. Family is really important to people. And so they just muddle along and try and do their best and get by. But that's not how we should think about government. That's not how we should think that we have a captive audience and that they're not going to leave Illinois because of that. That is the wrong thinking. It's very depressing to have that as the only reason I'm here is until my parents die, or until my youngest graduates from high school, and then I'm out of here. I mean, why should we have that type of attitude when we can change the trajectory of a state and make it a thriving haven for everybody? Because Illinois, I was telling you earlier, back in 2013, former Speaker of the House Lee Daniels had a series going on at Elmhurst College called Fixing Illinois. Now, our buddy Dan Proft would say, Illinois is not broken, it's fixed. So, you can play off of those words a little bit. But he was serious about this topic, fixing Illinois, what would it take? And so he had a number of people, of politicians and also people who were involved in policy, kind of give a speech about what we should do to fix Illinois. And the truth is that every single bill has been filed already that would make Illinois a better state in terms of its economic freedom for people, make it more thrive better. But we don't have the will. We don't have the will to vote in the right politicians who vote for the right policies, because we're bamboozled every single election season by talking points, or a politician going to the door. Well, she seemed really nice. Okay, but she voted to double your gas taxes, and she voted for the progressive income tax, which fortunately failed. And, she voted for, for additional entitlement programs that we can't afford, and whatever else. And so they just don't quite get it. But every single bill, I swear, has been filed to make Illinois a better state. And yet we're our worst enemies by voting in the same politicians.
No, and I think you're right. And let me give one more fact that I think is important for people to understand. Most people think, and it's partially true, that people are going to Texas and Tennessee and down south. But the 4 biggest net, again, we're talking about people leaving and coming in, are net against Florida. Florida's been the biggest winner of Illinoisans. They've gained 176,000 Illinoisans from us over the last decade. Texas, 150,000. But the next 2 are Indiana and Wisconsin. Indiana and Wisconsin win the battle for our people and their incomes. So it's not like this thing of, oh yeah, people going to the South because it's warmer and all that. No, they're going to Indiana and Wisconsin because things are easier there, but cheaper there, gas, property taxes, all those things we've talked about. So, it's important to think about.
Property taxes. Let's be honest, Ted, it's property taxes.
Well, it's the big one. Listen,
moving to Indiana. They're going to Northwest Indiana because you can get to the city of Chicago and your job there as quickly as if you lived sort of in the western suburbs. It's not an end. You can get there to visit family and you can get back to everything. So Northwest Indiana is thriving and Illinois is declining. So it's not rocket science. Everybody knows this. And by the way, Indiana survived somehow with a 1% property tax cap, which I know Wirepoints and you specifically have never really actually argued that we should put in some sort of legislation that requires a 1% property tax cap. You've always argued that we should make it local control, but the truth is all the policies that affect your property taxes are controlled at the state level. So your own local can never get ahead of this, which is why you've had the Peoria mayor say, I will never be able to pay off the pensions that we have right now in my lifetime. It's how we had Danville. The Danville mayor came in to talk about local bankruptcy because he said, my city is bankrupt. This is the Danville mayor, if you remember.
Yeah, no, I remember that. Yeah. He said
a two-page letter about it.
Yeah, he said, I can't do anything. I don't control pensions.
Right.
I don't control the collective bargaining laws. I don't control the prevailing wage laws. I don't control anything. I just execute. And if they keep shoving costs on me from Springfield, I either got to pay for it or, I don't know what happens. And so, yeah, he wanted bankruptcy. He says maybe it's a way to negotiate, but no, you're absolutely right. Jeannie, the other part that we didn't mention is Wisconsin. All you have to do is cross the border right out of Lake County, and you see it booming up there, right? That's another area that's just booming, and part of that is it's easier to just pick up and move and find opportunity right there. Now, hey, Jeannie,
yes.
Jeannie, do me a favor, talk about, because Indiana's done reforms, Wisconsin's done big labor reforms. They've made big reforms. They've made the big decisions, and those states didn't blow up. They're doing better.
That is definitely true. And I hear all the time from people around the state, just heard it today. Hey, my wife went on to go renew her professional license and she got the runaround and could never get a hold of somebody who actually could help her renew her license easily and quickly. And then she went on to do, and apparently it was $400 to renew this particular professional license. And he says, she also renewed it in Wisconsin. It was a piece of cake, done in 10 minutes, didn't cost that at all. So it's like you're getting nickeled and dimed in the state of Illinois. And not to mention, you just went through severe lockdowns with COVID that no other states had to do. I personally know families who left the state of Illinois simply over the COVID lockdowns. And they said, I am out of here. I'm not, and they could afford to stay, actually. They were fairly high income earners. But they left because of the lockdowns. They said, I want my kids in school. I want my kids playing sports, and we're out of here. Good families just left.
Yeah, Jeannie, let's talk a little bit about what this means, right, when we lose people and we lose their taxable income. Yeah. So at Wirepoints, we looked at this IRS data. And what we found is that, every year when these people leave, their incomes are no longer here. And it's typically been anywhere from $2 billion to $6 billion that leave the state, their incomes that are gone. We can't tax those anymore. And so, starting in 2000, we lost about $2 billion. Well, those people and their $2 billion are gone, not just in 2000, as Jeannie said earlier, but in 2001, 2002, and they're gone for the next 20 years. Then what we lose in 2001 is it looks like another $2 billion. So you keep doing this every year and you keep accumulating all these losses over 20 years. And what it turns out to be is that we've lost $468 billion that could have been taxed over that period, which means we could have much more income in Illinois. We'd have more people, more entrepreneurs. We'd be, well, maybe thriving even, right? But that money's gone. And if you flip the story, Florida's been getting that every year. They're growing their tax base and their revenue. So, this has massive impact for entrepreneurship and things like that.
Tax policy matters. I don't think anybody who's paying attention would deny that. It absolutely matters. And when you talk about $468 billion walking out of the door between 2000 and 2019, which is the figure that you have, that's over $23 billion in just income taxes at a 5% rate. But again, it goes back to the other stuff. It goes back to sales taxes. It goes back to excise taxes. It goes back to property taxes as well. All of that left as well.
Yeah, well, the bill would be lower for everybody, right? You know?
That's right. That's what we want.
Right, and another thing would be is that, you know, companies, when they're looking to invest and expand, either expand or actually, you know, start something, they want to go where it's growing, where it's hot, where people are active and, you know, and doing things. And you know, I met a young lady who had left Collinsville. I went down to Atlanta to get a haircut, and I sat down, and I said, "Where are you from?" Or she asked me, and I said, "I'm from Chicago area." And she was like, "Oh, I used to live in Illinois, but I left." And she told me the whole story of she had a salon, and she said there was nothing going on in Collinsville. There wasn't any dynamism. She started going to Atlanta and saw, you know, the entrepreneurship, the growth, the investment, and she left. And she was so happy, and she was sad to leave Illinois, but frankly, she was just like elated. And that's, I think, you know, we're losing out on the entrepreneurs every day.
Well, we are. And the other thing about that, we're also losing out on a lot of folks who would otherwise be able to support nonprofits, would otherwise be able to do charitable works and provide for money for charities as well. When you lose people, you also lose that as well. And I think that that's not something that we talk about a lot, but I think that it's also important to understand that when people flee a state, everything goes with them. They don't often look back and decide, well, I'm going to donate to the museum, or I'm going to donate to Catholic charities, or whatever it might be. They just don't.
No, you're right. They're going to do it in their new state, right? Where their community.
That's
you know,
right.
One more thing that I think, you know, matters a lot too is home values. And when we talk about these property taxes, the fewer and fewer people there are, you know, there's less competition for homes. There's fewer people paying taxes, and so the remaining people who are left there have to pay higher taxes. And, you know, anybody who knows anything about property taxes knows that the higher the property taxes go, the lower the home values go. And, you know, I've told this story of when I drive around, when I travel wherever I go, Decatur, Peoria, I love to go see what the neighborhoods look like, the nice neighborhoods, the struggling neighborhoods. And what you see are neighborhoods that are struggling to fix their homes anymore. It's not worth putting in $10,000 or $15,000 into a home that's going to go down in value, and where you have to keep paying even more taxes. So you get into this spiral, a negative spiral. And that's an ugly thing for many cities. And you can see that many Illinois cities are tired.
Well, and it does not serve the public sector workers at all for property values to decline like this. I mean, back when we did our whole series about Harvey, and you were very instrumental in putting the data together, but we basically said, look, it's your pension, your job, or your home. You cannot have all three, because at some point, the city can't afford it. If they can't afford to have you on the payroll as a public worker, then they can't afford, they can't afford your pension too. Then you're going to lose your home. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your home. It's all together. And I think that public sector workers who think that they have a secure retirement better think differently, because if there's enough people that do leave eventually, and there's a number of pensions that are in jeopardy. They really are in jeopardy. What we don't know is when they can no longer afford the pensions and they can no longer tax anymore. Then what happens? If you go to pay-go, your services completely deplete just to pay somebody else's pension and somebody else's salary who's on the job. But you're not getting hardly any city services at that point. You can't reinvest in your infrastructure at that point. You're only paying taxes to pay somebody's pension. That doesn't make sense. And then people leave again. And it's just a cycle that continues to spiral out of control. And eventually it hits the public sector worker. And I think they need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, and Jeannie, you're right. You've brought it back now to why are we struggling like this, and what do we need to do about it? Pensions is our biggest financial issue, right? It's the elephant in the room. You know, I want to before we talk about what we need to do about this, and let's say the top 5 things we need to fix in Illinois. You know, I always want to make clear that, you know, we complain about the problems, we complain about people leaving, not because we want to say, you know, denigrate Illinois. This is an amazing state with amazing assets and just really bad political, whatever you want to call it, political process, political machine. But we love this state, and we love to see it be a destination state. That's what we're talking about, is how do we make Illinois, and it should be, there's no reason why Illinois is not one of the top 5, top 10 growth states in the nation, not the bottom 3, but top 10. And so that's why we talk about these things. I won't go into why, you know, there's so many great assets in Illinois with the lake and then the infrastructure and the soil, all those things we know. So Jeannie, what is it? What are these? Let's try to see if we can name 5 things that that we would like to do to turn this place around and to have it be a place where people say, I'm not leaving Illinois. This is my home. And you have other people saying, I want to move to Illinois.
Well, we need to rethink property taxes entirely, and that means giving up state control over local decisions. And this starts with pensions. Pensions, I mean, it's how hard is it? I don't think it's hard at all to correct pensions with step.
You know, there's other states like Texas and Georgia and one of the Carolinas. They don't allow their unions, they don't allow their governments to negotiate with the unions, the public sector unions, the teachers, for example. So it's the taxpayers are prioritized over the unions, and that's how it should be. So we need reform.
But Ted, we're going in the opposite direction there. We're going in the opposite direction. The Democrats have put that referendum on the ballot that people will be looking at in November of 2022. It's on the ballot, whether or not you're going to protect constitutionally collective bargaining rights, constitutionally.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the wrong way.
Illinois, that's the wrong direction. We should be going for right to work, which, by the way, right to work does not mean that you don't have unions in the state. It just means that you have right to work, the right to work without being in a union. But we're going the wrong direction. The Democrats have the wrong direction in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and Jeannie, that's what every listener here should know, or every viewer should know, is that there's this thing called Amendment 1 on the ballot. We won't get into the details here, but you should be looking for it, and we'll be putting out, both Jeannie, all of us who oppose this, will be putting out information about why it's bad for Illinois. But Jeannie, there's another really positive thing that we could put in Illinois that would attract people, right? And Indiana's got the biggest one of those, and that's the school choice program. Illinois should have a massive school choice program that would attract people or keep people.
There is no doubt people want school choice. People from all political parties want school choice. In the wake of the COVID remote learning debacle, people are even more invested in a school choice option. And it actually, school choice would drive competition. It doesn't mean that your public school necessarily goes away. It means that the dollars follow the child and the parent selects the school that is right for their child. Why is it that you have folks of high net worth, and I can think of a number of them in my own sort of circle of friends, who say, well, one child, the oldest child's going to private school X, the middle child is going to public school, and the third child is going to private school Y. And so they have 3 different schools for 3 different kids because they have 3 different needs in that circle. Why is it only the wealthy that get that choice? That is not right. And there's a number, I mean, this is, to me, the civil rights policy of the future. We have way too many minority kids in failing schools in Chicago public schools. And this should be the battle cry for all the liberals out there, that we have full school choice and a competitive environment so these kids are actually learning.
Yeah, the minority kids be the big winners. Jeannie, last thing before we wrap up, there's one big reform that, given what we've had in the news with Mike Madigan, et cetera, we need real ethics reform. And I know you work on that as well. Talk a little bit about that, and then we can wrap up.
Well, it's interesting that for so many years, 3 years in a row, Mike Madigan did not have a legislative inspector general. That kind of blew up in 2017. And they end up eventually, after a year of just an interim, appointing somebody who her name is Carol Pope. And they went through some sort of ethics legislation reform that they said was going to be adequate. But in the end of the day, after that reform was passed, after that ethics bill passed and the governor signed it, the current legislative inspector general, Carol Pope, basically said, this is a paper tiger. This is not ethics reform whatsoever, and I'm resigning. And she did. And so we just got a new legislative inspector general who is there to check up on the legislators who have been actually at the root of a lot of the corruption, by the way. And even in the process of hiring the new legislative inspector general, the Democrats didn't go through the procedures that are set out in law. So they couldn't even act ethically getting that done. So we do have problems with ethics, but I always say this, truthfully, you can write a lot of ethics reform legislation, but if you continue to elect unethical people, they will try and find a workaround. They will try and hide what they're doing. And there's very little you can do if you elect unethical people to positions of power, because they will hide what they're doing in some fashion, some manner. Look how long it took to catch Mike Madigan doing what he's doing, allegedly doing what he did, which was a whole host of racketeering. It took a long time for them to bring that case together. And some of the charges date back to 2011. You're talking a decade ago. But they've been playing these games for a long time. And so I just go back to, if the problem is a lot of people that have been elected go down there. Like, for example, I know personally Tom Cullerton seems like a nice guy, right? He really does. He's a very nice guy, but I don't think he went down there to kind of get a scam job. I think he went down there and just figured, like, everybody else is doing it, why not? And I think it got caught up in the system. The system's corrupt because too many corrupt politicians have been running it that way for so many years and getting away with it.
Yeah, Jeannie, I think you're right. I think I've been saying that the indictment of Mike Madigan, good news, but it doesn't change the problems in Illinois until you dismantle the machine he's built. And it's going to take a lot to dismantle that machine. And that machine is part pension, the constitutional protection for pensions. It's part of the collective bargaining laws that are so powerful. It's part of that massive, most units of government in the country. It's all those things put together, and I call it kind of this legal corruption. And ordinary Illinoisans can't break it. We haven't figured out how to break that. So, Jeannie, to your point, it's an election year. This is the chance for Illinoisans to look at their candidates, to really challenge them. Are they talking about pension reform? Are they talking about collective bargaining reform? Are they willing to talk about school choice? If those candidates aren't willing to reform Illinois, things won't change. The status quo will stick around. So that's the big issue. It's a election year, very important.
Can I add one more thing, Ted? Because it just came to my mind. As far as Mike Madigan goes, some of his corrupt practices were right in everybody's eyes. I mean, right in front of them. So in 2014, we looked at the top 12 sales in Chicago land. 7 of the top
property. Yeah.
7 of the top 12 sales of property in Chicago were represented by Mike Madigan's law firm. On average, those 12 top sales in Chicago were at only 42% of their sale price value. And that is a corrupt system. He got them lower and lower and lower assessments legally, and he got away with it because Berrios was the assessor. And everybody knew it. Everybody knew how to play the game with Mike Madigan. You can talk to people, will openly tell you that they knew which lawyer they had to go to lower their assessment. And then he gets paid off 1/3 of the savings. And then the next year, the assessment goes up and he plays the same game. And everybody's been playing this game for so long. And I actually brought all this out to light on the House floor. And nobody did anything about it. So corrupt.
I encourage
one of you.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to read the 106-page indictment on Madigan, because you can kind of see how it works. They lay it out. You read the stories, and you can imagine that that's how it plays out on most things. And again, legally, right? We're talking about how they horse trade, but they horse trade your taxes for something else, and that's the problem. Jeannie, this has been great. This is the first of a 4-part series, and so we'll be talking about some other issues. We'll have a few other experts, but it's always great to have Jeannie on because she knows all these issues inside out, and I know that from experience and her ability to dig into a bill, into the finances. And so I appreciate you being here. And we have to keep fighting. We have to keep educating people in Illinois. That's part of our goal. It's election year. We got that Amendment 1. Potentially new legislature, potentially new governor. So it's a big year, and please join us at Wirepoints. Jeannie's got breakthrough ideas. Please join us on Facebook. Sign up for our daily newsletter. And Jeannie, thanks again for being with us.
Thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.